Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. Texas removes 1.1 million people off of their voter registry because these people were ineligible to vote. Some even dead, which, you know, you're still ineligible. We'll get into that in a little bit, but Joe Rogan's going to be talking about that and just talking about the voting process as a whole. And then I'm going to jump into some clips of Greg Abbott speaking, the news breakdown, and I made a couple connections of, you know, they're saying that there's no evidence that there's non-citizens voting, but also they know that there's non-citizens on the voter registry. It's very odd. I'll break it all down for you after, but let's jump into the Rogan clip first. Let's go.
What's AI generated in the world of academia is going to lag. But it is, yeah, I do think, and then going back to what we were talking about, the level of disinformation coming into November is going to be shocking I think for some people, even if they haven't been paying attention. But a lot of people don't, because a lot of people don't have the time. But yeah, I think when we get there, when we wake up and the election results are announced, 3 weeks later.
Well, Pennsylvania's already saying they're not going to be able to do it on election night.
Yeah, what the f?
They used to. What'd you guys do?
Yeah.
We used to.
Remember, you go to
What
bed
happened?
and you knew when you went to bed if you stayed up late.
Well, not only that, there's no pandemic. So why do we have all these mail-in ballots?
Well,
that seems kind of silly.
Yeah. We know what else seems silly, and I don't consider this to be voter suppression. Have a f***ing ID to show that you're a U.S. citizen.
That's
right?
racist.
I know. I apologize, but I do think it makes sense. You go to
100% makes sense.
I couldn't vote in another country.
You should not be able to vote here without an ID.
Yeah.
Just like you can't get a driver's license. You have to have your fucking birth certificate. You have to, we have paperwork.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason, because people are full of shit. There's a lot of fraudsters out there. And if there's a way to mitigate fraud in the most important thing that we do, which is choose a leader, it's one of the most important things we do. We exercise our right to vote. And if you're going to with that, and if you are willfully making it so that it's easier to deceive people, that's crazy. That's crazy that we don't put a stop to that.
Yeah, you would think that would be the default position, is how do we mitigate the risk, right? And let's do it, again, fine, without voter suppression. Don't make it difficult for a particular community or group or whatever to vote. Of course not. But I don't think it's asking too much to just say, okay, proof of citizenship, please.
It doesn't seem like a big issue. In Texas, they've canceled out 1 million potential votes that would have been illegal. See if you can find that.
Wow. So
they found a bunch of people, I think 500,000 that were registered to vote that were dead. And then there's a bunch of other people that were registered that were ineligible. And so the way they're framing it in Texas, the way I saw it framed in one newspaper, that Ken Paxton is going after Latinos because he doesn't want them to vote. 1.1 million ineligible voters removed from Texas voter rolls. So Texas has removed 1.1 million. That's a lot, folks.
Look at that. 457,000 were deceased.
Yes, 457,000 deceased people, 6,500 potential non-citizens. And so top Texas Republicans have dedicated significant time and resources to targeting voter fraud, though cases in Texas are exceedingly rare. Well, I mean, the thing is, just the fact that that's going on, that they found 1 million people that shouldn't be eligible. That, goddamn, that could shift an election. How many people vote?
Oh, look, Georgia was decided by what, 12,000, 1,200 votes? It was some ridiculously small number, right? And that's the way this is going to be in November. Is the only people that matter going into November, frankly, are the undecideds.
When you look at the accusations of voter fraud in 2020, does any of it stick? Does any of it, will you look at it and go, that is weird?
I would say that in our current system, I don't have any evidence of actual, I can't point to actual moments and say, yeah, look at that. That was voter fraud. But I will say this. You may have heard me mention that I have a company, Portman Square Group, that does a lot of things, including fraud investigations.
Too.
The President's Daily Brief, by the way, our YouTube channel, @President's Daily Brief, is killing it. I'm told.
Congratulations.
I'm told. I'm not sure.
So what, in terms of our system, I interrupted you to tell you how awesome you are.
Yeah.
But the system that we have, is there any evidence that you can point to that says this doesn't look right?
Well, what I was going to say was that while I don't have evidence to a particular moment in time, as someone who's done a lot of fraud investigations, you look for the opportunity to commit fraud, right? And it's like what you were just saying a moment ago, right? If you can button it up and make it more secure, why wouldn't you, right? And so we've created an environment where there's definitely potential for fraud, right? There's no doubt about it. More so than if you had voter, ID, or just you had to provide ID to show citizenship. And if you did it in person, and if you got the results, and you didn't have massive early voting, and you didn't have drop boxes and ballot harvesting, but so we've got a process now that has created a wider playing field for people who may want to commit fraud. Right? And so I'm a cynical person, so that to me says, yeah, there's going to be fraud, or there has been fraud. Don't have specific examples, but I just know from looking at a lot of fraud over the years, that's the way it works.
Well, voter fraud has always been a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Voter fraud has been a real problem from the beginning of voting because people are creepy and people like to game the system and they like to cheat and they like to steal and they like to do things where their side wins. Right. And if they can figure out, look, just think about the way they talk about Trump, the existential threat to democracy, kleptocrat, all these crazy terms that they use. They can call him Hitler, and then everything you do to keep Hitler from being in power is a good thing,
right,
including fraud.
Yeah, you're justified because you're saving democracy.
Yeah, that's where it gets scary because then guess what, face? You set a precedent, and now if the Republicans get in power and they do the same thing and use the same playbook, then they're stealing it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you care about America. If you really are a patriot, you can't do that.
But I digress.
Maybe try withdrawal.
So we expanded the voting parameters, or the ability to vote, for that moment in time for the pandemic. And yes, you would think reasonable people would say, we don't have the pandemic, let's at least go back to where we were before the pandemic, right? In terms of when we could vote and how. But that didn't happen. And so then you have to ask yourself, being a reasonable person, well, why? Would people just love the new process so much they thought, oh my God, we have to keep this? Or was there some benefit to it that they saw? Anyway, I would be speculating if I pointed to a particular state or incident and say that was an obvious case of voter fraud. But I do know for a fact that when you expand the playing field for fraud, someone's going to fill that gap. They're going to come in and take advantage of it. And like you said, people want to win. I'm
just scared because of the rhetoric. And I'm not just scared because I want one side to win. I'm scared because I think that by overzealously wanting their side to win and doing it so in a way that really isn't fair, that you set up a precedent where anybody can do that in the future. And they think they're justified in doing that in the future. Like, there's a lot of people that think 2020 was stolen. And Trump has said it over and over again. But
let's get into it. Man, a lot was said there. You know something I'll say about Mike Baker? You know how he travels off and he'll start talking about this, he'll start talking about that. When you go to his YouTube channel, there's none of that. He doesn't do that at all. I went to his YouTube channel just randomly. I'm like, let me check out this guy's channel. He's dialed in. What's going on? I don't understand. You go onto the biggest platform in the world and you're just like, Skeeter and Zippy and Muggsy. But when he's on his podcast, he's laser focused. It's pretty interesting to see, actually. Anyways, let's get into this whole thing. So Texas did remove 1 million people. And here's the thing. Every news outlet, you can see it right here, from their voter rolls as part of controversial reforms. Every news outlet is talking about this as if they did a bad thing. It's so odd when you go through it all. So let's move on to the first video here. Okay, and then I'm just going to take you through a little bit of what I discovered, because it's very interesting how they're trying to frame what these guys are doing. And in my mind, I would think if you're in a state where they're talking about removing people and they're talking about cleaning things up, that's going to instill more confidence in you. But for some reason, it's being framed the opposite. Let's get into it.
We are now less than 2 months away from the start of early voting in Harris County for the November general election. State leaders say they are concerned, however, about election integrity. But other officials say they are confident in the state's systems. Victor Jacobo joins us from the newsroom now. Victor, the state's top elections official spoke today at the state capitol. What did you hear?
Yeah, that's right, Mia. The issue of election integrity was part of the discussion during a Texas House Committee meeting today in Austin. While the state's Republican leaders point to concerns about election integrity, the officials in charge of elections say the state's contests are secure.
We want our voters, our residents here in Texas to make sure and to understand that we have the highest standards in our voter integrity.
Today, Governor Greg Abbott touting more than 1 million ineligible voters were removed from the state's voter rolls. That figure is a total since 2021, and while it includes more than 6,500 non-citizens removed, the majority were from people who died, asked to have their registration canceled, or change their address. The election director for the Secretary of State's office reaffirming the strength of the state's administration of voter rolls.
Texas is very good at list maintenance activities. We have strong, clean voter rolls.
Meanwhile, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has pushed ahead with concerns over alleged voter registration of non-citizens, though he has not presented evidence. Last week, a social media post by Fox News personality Maria Bartiromo suggested such activity was happening in North Texas. It was later reposted and quoted by Paxton's account, but later the head of the Republican Party of Parker County said there was no evidence the incident alleged ever happened. Secretary of State's office today affirming there has not been a recent spike in voter roll data showing non-citizen voter registration.
And so I'm trying to make sure that there's been no anomaly or, let's say, an increase or a peak in non-citizens actually registering.
What I can say is we look at that data pretty regularly to look for potential issues or anomalies. We have not seen any unusual activity.
Okay, so you heard that, right? So this is this lady. She's talking about how clean, what were her exact words? Strong and clean the rolls are, right? We're talking about 500,000 people that died. I really don't think that that's being given enough attention. Maybe it is on the low by Ken Paxton because he is looking into this with a more critical eye, okay? He's looking into it like, he wants to make sure everything's on the up and up. But that has to get looked at more because that's a lot of people. Almost 500,000 is a lot of people. And how did that happen? And were they all just in there and then passed away? Or were they passed away and then put in there? That's a question to ask. It's not conspiratorial. It's just common sense. Like, if you're investigating things, investigate, right? Now, past that, this lady just said there's no evidence. They keep talking about how there's no evidence. But here, listen to this.
New laws on voting security took effect. Abbott highlighted some categories, including 6,500 potential non-citizens who were purged from the rolls. Of that, about 1,900 had a voter history, and those cases will be investigated further.
Now, I'm going to let this go on in a second, but isn't that right there the evidence? Isn't this this evidence enough? There's 6,500 potential non-citizens, 500,000 that are dead. Doesn't this push aside what she's saying about things being strong and clean? But don't get me wrong, they're obviously working on it. They have women like her who are, making sure that everything's all good. And then they have people like Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton that are pushing for more cleaning up. And, so they're doing the work to get things cleaned off. That's undeniable. But the fact that she's like, oh, no, everything's actually clean, and people keep saying there's no evidence. Is this not evidence? Like, what? I don't understand. And also, they keep saying that Ken Paxton didn't have any evidence, but he actually did an investigation, and he found out there is these organizations that will stand outside of the DMV and try to get people to register to vote. So if you're a non-citizen, and a lot of the times, and I wish I had video of this because I've seen video of it, a lot of the times these people will be Spanish speaking and they will try to pull in people who they know don't speak that well, or, speak to someone in Spanish and bring them on. And the next thing you know, they're registering them to vote. Now, I can't say what that is, but you know what it sounds like. There's a lot of that going on. Ken Paxton actually had undercover investigations going on towards that. They found 3,500 people. I don't understand how that classifies as not evidence. It's just people left and right saying there's no evidence. Sorry, let's keep going.
Nothing in Abbott's new release indicates evidence of voting fraud so far. The vast majority of other cases are people who died or who ended up on the suspense list, which commonly happens when voters move without notifying their county registrar. Christina Adkins, the state elections director, says her office notifies county election officials on a regular basis about the status of potential non-citizens.
I think it's just, to say that there's no evidence is odd, but I think more so what's happening here is that they're doing a good job, because what other states are coming forward saying they've removed 1 million people, so they are doing a good job. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. They're doing a good job, but to say that everything's on the up and up, I don't know, it seems a little weird. I think what they should be saying is we are doing the work to make sure that everything is free and fair. We're doing that work. You can see us doing that work, and that would be it. Here, let me play this clip really quick.
Today, Governor Abbott announced that more than 1 million names have been removed from voter rolls in the last 3 years. According to the governor, more than 6,500 non-citizens were on that list, which is less than 1% of the total. Among them, at least 1,900 have a voter history.
So the reason I play that is because they say 1,900 have a voter history out of the non-citizens. Does that mean if you have a history of voting, maybe... Is that not them voting? I don't understand. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. I was talking with Eddie Bravo the other day. Maybe he's rubbing off. Maybe that's the problem. Sorry about that. But it seems like if there's a history, they voted and they're getting taken off the registry, which is solid, but they have voted before. And perhaps it's not in a federal election. That's the other thing, right? As soon as we always hear this whole non-citizens registered to vote, perhaps it's not in federal. Maybe it's only been in local. I don't know. But there is still an impact there as well. But it's just very interesting. Now listen to Greg Abbott actually speak on this whole thing via an interview, and then we'll get into some other stuff. And there's actually something funny I want to play for you at the end in regards to voter ID. Very, very funny. Very interesting stuff there. So you would think what he's doing right now is a good thing. You would think what he is trying to get across to people is being received well. But for some reason, if you look here in this article, I found this funny. This was the main part of the article, right? There's the headline, of course, but it's underneath the headline. It says federal and let me move this here. Sorry. Actually, I got to shrink it down for you guys. My bad. Let me shrink that down for you guys. So it says federal and state law already required voter roll maintenance. Experts warn the governor's framing of this routine process could be used to undermine trust in elections. It's like, what? What? And this is where it just gets weird, because what they're doing, what he is doing alongside Ken Paxton, is actually instilling more trust. That's all that's happening. Obviously, aren't you going to trust this even more? Now, after that, I went into Harris County. Harris County is very odd. That woman that was talking, she's a part of Harris County. She was like, we got to, what was her exact words? Strong and clean rolls. Although you can see there's 1 million people that had to be removed statewide. There was an investigation, actually. There's no fraud. Just want to say that. There was none. But one of the people in Harris County who was a ballot counter or taking in the votes was actually criminally charged because she was responsible, not the woman talking, but someone was responsible for ballots being gone, like running out. They ran out of ballots and it was because of her. And they say it was because she had a second job and she couldn't actually dedicate her time. So out of nowhere, the ballots were just gone. So voters would come in and they'd be like, we don't have any more ballots. Sorry. I don't know. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. But when it comes to voter ID, it is the best thing to hear white liberals and black liberals, but this gentleman doesn't find any. He finds a bunch of liberals and a bunch of black people and asks them about voter ID. I love this. I'll play a little bit of each.
Voter ID laws? Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, and then he switches over to start talking to black people. Okay, let's listen to what the black people have to say. These people who don't have internet, can't find the DMV. Check this out. Oh my gosh, I love it. That one girl, they just don't have the knowledge. You got to be able to pay for the internet. That one guy. That's so good. They don't have the money to pay for the internet, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone knows that. Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm actually borrowing my white friend's internet.
With New York with ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy cameras?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that. It's on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid can figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually
unlimited.
Unlimited data.
Mm-hmm. I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's why my thought process on it.
So good. Oh my gosh. So ridiculous. Voter ID is racist. The black people are insulted. They all have IDs. They all know where to get IDs. They all know how to use the internet. Shockingly know how to use the internet. I might have some competition in this whole thing that I do. I didn't realize so many other black people knew how to use the internet. It's so funny in that case, that little voter ID thing, because it's almost like these people who are liberal and so tolerant, it's like as if it's a big circle and they're coming around to the other side so much that they're starting to sound racist, you know? And then once you get past that racist part, you get to the part where most of us are at, where it's like everybody is very equal and everybody has the same access to things. And yeah, it's harder when you're poor and it might be easier when you're rich, but we're all here and we can all figure it out and we have access to information. And, you know, I want to treat the white guy just like I would treat the Asian guy and the brown guy and the black guy. And that's how it should be. They're almost there, these liberal people. They're so close, you know, but they're still at the point where, you know, black people don't know how to use the internet. Soon they'll come around. Soon they'll come around. Don't worry. Give it a couple more years. These woke people will start to sound cool eventually. Probably not. Probably not. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to bring you all that information. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, Texas having this issue. They're cleaning it up the best they can. Alabama also had this issue with about 3,500 non-citizens being registered to vote. They dealt with it very swiftly. A gentleman named West Allen, I believe he's Secretary of State, he dealt with it right away. So, you know, the states that are dealing with it, honestly, it's gonna make more trust in the whole process. But that's just 2 states. I wonder if California, New York, Chicago, I wonder if they're gonna come forward and talk about all the non-citizens they have to be registered to vote. Something to think about there. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and other than that, I'm out.